I was in high school when Mrs. Sundell became our new history teacher. There were rumors that she'd been kicked out of her old school for rupturing the eardrum of one of her students. Apparently, that student was deaf, and she blew an air horn right next into his ear to prove that it wouldn't affect him. But of course, it did affect him. His eardrum ruptured, and he had to be taken to the hospital because blood started running out of his ear. So everyone knew Mrs. Sundell was a bit crazy. And one time, while talking about the Holocaust, she suddenly burst into tears. I wondered if it was because she was Jewish and had lost part of her family to the Nazis. But then she explained that her husband had dumped her the day before for a younger woman. To be frank, I thought it was tasteless of her to tell us students about her private life while discussing an event as tragic as the Holocaust. But I knew she had mental issues. So the next day after class, when all other students had left the classroom, I gave her flowers and said, "I'm sorry you were going through a divorce, Mrs. Sundell, but I believe in you." Now, let me preface that I was 18 years old at the time, and nothing that happens in this story is illegal. Of course, Mrs. Sundell was an attractive woman, but I never planned on becoming her lover.
"Oh, thank you for the flowers. You are such a gentleman."
No problem, and enjoy your weekend.
Wait, I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you free this Saturday?
Free for what?
Oh, I'm gonna cook some pasta, and I haven't been on a first date in years. So why don't you come over?
Of course, I accepted the offer. Mrs. Sundell was gorgeous after all, but in hindsight, I realized that Mrs. Sundell was also mentally unstable, and that maybe I was taking advantage of her recent breakup. I mean, the first time I visited her home, she immediately introduced me to her 8-year-old daughter and said,
"Hey, look who your mom is dating now. He's one of my students and super cute."
"Much cuter than your useless dad." Mrs. Sundell's daughter looked disturbed. She was extremely underweight, had dark circles under her eyes, and avoided eye contact. Meanwhile, Mrs. Sundell pulled me on the couch and started making out with me. It felt super awkward because her daughter sat less than a meter away from us, but she knew what to do and left the room so we could be alone. Then, at dinner, Mrs. Sundell told me about her husband.
"He is crazy. One time my phone battery died and he couldn't reach me for 3 hours. So he called the police and told them I was missing. Also, he's been stalking me ever since we broke up."
"Stalking you?"
"Yeah, he always parks somewhere near my house and watches where I go and who visits me."
"So he might have seen me come into your house today?"
"He probably did. And I warn you, he is violent."
She said that with a big smirk on her face, as if she wanted her husband to find out about me and beat me up. I asked, "Has your husband ever been violent?"
"Of course. Just recently, he locked me into the trunk of his car for a whole weekend, just because I told him that I was cheating on him with our neighbor."
Oh God, what had I gotten myself into? I looked over to Mrs. Sundell's daughter and asked, "Do you like your dad?"
"No, I hate him, and he's only my stepdad."
And has he ever treated you badly in any way? She looked away. She was too ashamed to answer the question. "Okay, listen, Mrs. Sundell. If your husband is violent, you have to protect your daughter from him."
"Well, that's why you are here, to protect us."
It suddenly dawned on me that Mrs. Sundell had the emotional maturity of a child. She wouldn't take responsibility for anything, not even her own daughter's safety. So, after dinner, I wrote down my number on a piece of paper and gave it to Mrs. Sundell's daughter. "Call me if you are ever in danger." Then I told Mrs. Sundell I couldn't solve her relationship problems and that we would not meet up again until she had successfully divorced her husband. I thought that was the end of the story. But a week later, she came into school with a black eye. She said that someone had shot a football in her face, but I didn't believe it and suspected that her husband had hit her. After class, I asked her, "Did your husband do this to you?"
"What do you care? You said you want nothing to do with me."
Oh God, she was so immature. I should have stayed away from her as far as I could, but I wanted to make sure her daughter was safe from her stepdad. So I told her I would spend the night at her place to protect them. I was sleeping in her bed when in the middle of the night, someone knocked on the front door.
"Oh no, it's my husband. If he finds out you are here, he will kill you for sure."
I was afraid, but also determined. I picked up a lamp, followed Mrs. Sundell to the entry door, and said,
Don't let him inside, and if he tries to hurt you, I will knock him out with a lamp, okay? Yeah, that's a great plan.
But Mrs. Sundell opened the door, and her husband's first question was, "Why do you have a black eye? Did someone hurt you?"
Oh, don't you remember? You got drunk and hit me.
What are you talking about? I've been sober for 6 months. And anyway, why did you send me an SMS 20 minutes ago telling me to immediately come over?
What? I didn't send you a message. And you can't come into my house right now because I have a visitor.
Oh my God. Did Mrs. Sundell just tell her husband that I was here? Did she want him to kill me? What? You brought another man into my house? You are cheating on me?
We are getting divorced. Have you already forgotten?
Mrs. Sundell's husband pushed her to the side and stepped into the house. I wasn't sure if I should use the moment of surprise and knock him out with my lamp, or instead try to talk to him and explain myself. But I had no time to think. So when his bald head came through the door, I swung the lamp right at him. However, this guy was jacked and just blocked my swing with his arm. Then he grabbed me by the throat and pushed me with all his strength against the wall. He was much stronger than me, but as a last resort, I kicked him in the nuts, which actually brought him to his knees. Then I told Mrs. Sundell to immediately call the police.
I can't do that. He is still my husband, and I love him.
Okay, this woman was crazy. I went home and thought about what just happened. It seemed that Mrs. Sundell had only started a romance with me to get back at her husband and to make him jealous. So the next day in school, I went to her and wiped my finger over her black eye. It's only makeup. You made it all up.
I had to. Without the black eye, you would have never come back to protect me from my husband.
Mrs. Sundell was lying through her teeth, like she always did. The only reason I came back to visit her at her home was to check up on her daughter and make sure she was okay. We were eating dinner when I asked, "Where is your daughter, by the way?"
Oh, shoot. I forgot to pick her up from school again. Can you do it for me?
It was 8 p.m. when I arrived at her school. The teacher had waited 3 hours for Mrs. Sundell's daughter to be picked up and was really mad. But I felt even worse for the girl. I knew she felt like no one cared about her. I took her to McDonald's for dinner, where she told me that her mom often locked her into her room for days, so her mom could sleep with other men without being disturbed. And I had seen her room. It only had a dirty mattress on the floor and not a single toy to play with. Have you ever been to a playground or watched a movie in a cinema?
No, my mom only allows me to leave my room to eat, watch TV, and go to school.
This girl had been seriously neglected. I brought her back home, but I could see Mrs. Sundell's husband through the window. I can't protect you there inside, but I promise we will do something fun this weekend because you are a great girl. Don't ever let your mom make you think otherwise.
Can you marry my mom and become my dad?
I told her that wasn't possible. However, for the next 7 years, I've picked her up every weekend to do something fun, like taking her to the playground or just asking her how she was doing. Mrs. Sundell's husband, of course, hated that I was taking care of his stepdaughter. He even almost caught me once in front of their house. I was barely able to escape. The reason he couldn't completely forbid me from seeing his stepdaughter was that I had once threatened to contact the police and Child Protective Services on him. Anyway, I still visit his wife sometimes when he is on business trips. So I'm not completely innocent in this story either. Meanwhile, the little girl is a teenager now, and she is doing okay. She has been diagnosed with ADHD and is failing most of her classes, probably because her mom neglected her so badly. However, I've helped her find a therapist so she can work through her childhood trauma, and I hope she will live a normal life when she moves out of her mom's home.
I don't like talking about my childhood. All you gotta know is that my mom got hooked on heroin and meth, and when I was 12, she brought me to a dark alley where some sketchy man was waiting for us. I was petrified, but then out of nowhere, police arrived and separated me from my mom. They told me that she had tried to sell me to a drug dealer so she could get another hit of heroin, but I have no idea if that's true. My mom got a 20-year prison sentence, and I had to move into a children's home. You normally don't get adopted if you are over the age of 10, and it was no different for me. But my streak of bad luck wasn't over yet. At age 16, I was diagnosed with cancer. A harmless one, though. The doctor said I shouldn't worry too much because my chance of survival was over 98%. But it still sucked because I was stationed in a big hospital room with lots of annoying kids. Well, one day, a well-dressed man came inside, followed by a camera crew. He said, "I am proud to announce that my company will pay for all medical bills of these sick kids and make sure they get the best treatment possible." Then he looked around as if he was searching for something. Finally, his eyes stopped on me. He came over and said, "My child, what is your name?" "Emma." "Please tell us why you are here." "I have stage 1 breast cancer." That's when another child screamed,
"Yes, and she's also an orphan."
The man was shocked.
"Cancer and an orphan? You poor little girl."
After a while, he told the cameraman to stop filming. Then he asked if I wanted to eat dinner with him, and I accepted.
"So how is it to live inside a children's home?"
"It sucks. Most nights I go to bed hungry because there isn't enough food around, and some of the kids are extremely violent. I've been beaten up and pushed down the stairs more times than I can count."
"I'm sorry to hear that you have such a difficult life, and I know the offer I'm making you now will come out of nowhere. But do you want to move in with me? I have a nice house and promise to take care of you well."
I wasn't sure. I didn't want some old guy to take care of me. It was scary, and I wondered if he would feel the same if I wasn't a pretty girl. But I had checked the guy online. He was a public figure and seemed reasonably nice, so I agreed. His house was just as one expects from a billionaire, beautiful and with taste. However, when he showed me my room, I was a bit freaked out. Everything was pink and girly looking. "Was this your daughter's room before?"
"What? No, I don't have kids."
"Then why do you have a room in your house that looks like a 12-year-old girl lives inside?"
"Oh, I told my assistant to furnish this room. I must have forgotten to tell her that you are already 16. But I like it, don't you?"
I still wasn't sure if this guy was a creep or just socially awkward. But anyway, there was no question that he cared about me. He had high standards, and when I got home with a D on my exam, he told me that was unacceptable. No one had ever held me up to any standards before, and I didn't want to disappoint him again. So I started studying for school every day, and he also hired me a tutor. I really liked the tutor. He was cute, funny, and yes, already 24 years old. We often talked about topics completely unrelated to school, and one time, we were just about to kiss when the old man walked in on us and screamed,
"Hey, you are paid to help her study! Take your hands off her!"
"I'm sorry, but we were just taking a short 5-minute break from studying."
"Don't lie to me! I've been eavesdropping on you two for a while, and all you've talked about was celebrity gossip! I hate liars like you! You are fired!"
I was surprised to see the old man so angry and wondered if maybe he was just jealous to see another guy flirting with me. It felt like he wanted me all for himself. However, I was so grateful that he allowed me to live with him that I didn't dare to question his intent. During one dinner, I told him about my plans on studying cinematography after high school. He liked to hear how passionate I was and arranged for me to work for a famous director for a month. That's the privilege you get from having a billionaire daddy. However, at bedtime, he always came into my room and said goodnight to me. And one time, he gave me a goodnight kiss on my forehead. Again, I didn't know what to make of it. I knew dads kissed their daughters, but we'd known each other for not even a year. The next morning, he apologized, though, saying,
"That kiss last night might have been a bit weird. It's just that I'm on the autism spectrum and don't always know what's socially normal."
Oh, now it all made sense. I said, "Don't worry. I've noticed that you can be different at times, but in a good way."
"So you liked it? The kiss I gave you?"
Oh God, what was I supposed to respond? It was such a weird question. Finally, I said, "Yeah, I liked it. I guess it means you care about me." That's when he took me in his arms and gave me another kiss. Well, for my 17th birthday, he told me to invite all my friends for a big party at his house. It was really amazing. He even paid a famous singer to perform a concert. But I think he got envious of all the attention the singer got and asked her to leave again. To make things worse, I saw him chat up all my female friends. I even heard him say,
"Yeah, I met Drake once at a club in Las Vegas. I got his number in my phone."
Why was he trying so hard to impress my teenage friends? He was a grown man, and it seemed so immature. But again, he was paying for the whole party, so I didn't complain. However, back in school after the weekend, one of my friends told me, Your dad is so cool. I wish he would adopt me too. Yeah, he's pretty great. Can you give me his number? Maybe he can give me some career advice. He's so smart, you know. Was she serious? I told her, no, I won't give you the number of a 40-year-old guy. You sound like you have a crush on him. That's disgusting. You are only 17. Oh, stop it. This guy got you an apprenticeship with one of the biggest directors in the world. If you won't give me his number, then it only proves how you want him all for yourself. At first, I thought she was crazy for accusing me of such a thing. But then I realized something. Every evening before the man came home, I quickly went to the bathroom and made sure I looked good. If I wore a blouse, I would open another button. And often, I even put on some extra makeup, just to look good for him. I started doing this after he bought me a new car. Not a super expensive one, but I was still so grateful that I ran up to him and thanked and kissed him. I could tell how much he liked it. I think he wanted to spoil me like any dad spoils his daughter. And all I could do in return was to wait for him to come home after work, look pretty, and greet him with a kiss. Is that weird? Now, there is one thing I haven't mentioned yet. One day, I accidentally smacked my elbow against the bathroom wall and noticed the sound was off. It was hollow. I tried to measure the thickness of the wall, and it measured 4 feet, which was way too much. I also checked the other walls, and they were all the same. Very thick and hollow. Were there secret passages? Maybe that's how the old man had eavesdropped on me and my tutor. Of course, I have seen movies where you'd take a book out of a shelf and a secret door would open. I thought for a moment where the entry door to the secret passages would most likely be, and figured it had to be the old man's office. I felt bad going in there without his permission, but it only took me a few minutes to find a button under his desk. And just like in the movies, a bookshelf slid to the side. I guess rich people have the money to build such gags into their houses. The floor looked perfectly clean, which meant it had been used and cleaned recently. I walked through the floor and quickly found a small hole you could slide open. When I looked through it, I could see our living room. I became petrified. Was there a hole to my room too? Or my bathroom? What if he had secretly watched me all this time? I nervously walked on. This was the wall to my bedroom. It didn't have a hole, but I could see that there once was one. It must have just recently been sealed with concrete. Despite how creepy everything was, I didn't confront the old man about it. I told myself, he would never watch me through the walls because he loves me and would never hurt me in any way, right? I wasn't fully sure, but I knew he'd get upset if he found out I'd searched through his office room. One time, he'd bought me a new smartphone, and all I said was a quick, thank you. Apparently, this wasn't good enough for him. I didn't show enough appreciation, so he told me to return it. I was shocked to see him so angry, but I knew what to do. I said, I'm so sorry, Daddy, and then I gave him a hug and a kiss. That was enough to change his mood. Anyway, for my 18th birthday, he took me out into the countryside on a hunting trip. He said he'd told his assistant to book us a house, but when we arrived, it only had one bed. He said, I'm sorry, I must have forgotten to tell my assistant that I'll bring a guest this time. I hope you don't mind sleeping in the same bed as me tonight. I also brought a Woody Allen movie with me. We can watch it together. But sharing a bed was too much for me, so I told him I wanted to go home. But I flew us all the way out here. I thought you wanted to go hunting with me. Now I got angry too, because he was pressuring me into something I didn't like. I ended up leaving while he stayed. But on my way home, I received a nasty message from him on my phone. He insulted me and said I wasn't allowed to stay another night at his house, and that he wouldn't pay for my college tuition, even though he had promised to do so before. Was he really so offended by me not sharing a bed with him? He was so immature, and I was so sad. I felt like I'd lost the only person that I could rely on. But guess what? 6 months forward, after I had moved out of his house, I find out that he is now dating my ex-classmate, the one that was on my birthday party and asked me the following day for his phone number. So maybe he is a giant creep after all. Please let me know in the comments if you can make any sense of this.